Hello, hello. It's the start of August, and I have ambitions. Big ambitions. How many are here? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. But some of these are chunky boys. Chunky boys. But this is on my. I just thought this week we'd go through the TBR list for August. Thank you so much for all of those that have looked at the last video for July and what we read in July. This month, I will say there. There's a lot more BookTok influenced titles here, including some of the most popular ones I've seen. So we're just going to go through it, and hopefully we'll get through these in August. I'm excited about a lot of these. I will say one of them I'm almost already finished. I'm recording this a few days into August already, and this is one of BookTok's and YouTube's most popular authors, and I'm ashamed to say I haven't read him before, and that's Brandon Sanderson, the first book in the Mistborn series, The Final Empire. Now, I have read one Brandon Sanderson before. I read The Way of Kings. Could I tell you anything that happened in that book? No. I read it about 18 months ago, epic fantasy, and I thought it was fine, but it didn't leave a lasting impression, and I didn't really get the hype around Sanderson. Obviously, he's incredibly prolific, and he's on everybody's list for fantasy writers. Like, this is the dude, and I really respect the work. But in BookTok's defense, they are very clear in that you should start with this series. That this is where you should start with Sanderson if you're ready to make a commitment. Start with this series over the Stormlight Archive, which starts with The Way of Kings. Because this is, and I will say, look, it's in this beautiful 10th anniversary edition, which I'm glad I could pack up. So what's the story? Well, listen, there's a magic system here that is reliant on metal, in which people swallow metal, and the different metal gives them different powers, and it's set in a kingdom that's incredibly dystopian, and this Dark Lord's taken over, and basically there's this crew of thieves who all have different access to magic, and they decide they're going to overthrow the kingdom. So it's fantasy, and it's written like fantasy, but what makes Mistborn so accessible is that it's a heist novel, right? It's set out like a heist, so it's a great beginner fantasy book. And I will say, look, I'm enjoying it way more than I can remember Way of Kings. It's very easy to read, well paced. The world building is super clear. This isn't a review, but I'm just saying I'm enjoying it. I'll give you my final and I'll let you know how I get on with it, and whether in fact, drop me a comment below in terms of where I should go next. Should I just read the next Sanderson in the next Mistborn, or should I hop, skip, and jump to something else? Because he is on my list now. And anyway, you can get my final thoughts in the next video next month. But that's what we're almost done so far. This is the science psychology book for the month. This is actually recommended to me via my brother-in-law / mother-in-law. Shout out to them. This is Brain Energy, a revolutionary breakthrough in understanding mental health and improving treatment for anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, and more, by Christopher Palmer. He's the assistant professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. I'm excited for this. It's an incredibly sciencey book, obviously, about mental health and about his philosophy of the common cause for mental illness. He builds upon, I believe, pre-existing evidence that a lot of mental illness can be put down to a metabolic dysfunction, which is really interesting. It's not a huge book, but I anticipate it will be dense. For those of you that don't know, I'm studying psychology, and every month I do try and read at least one kind of contemporary psychology or psychiatry text to better inform my practice and approaches. So I'm really interested to get into this Brain Energy. The next book is also a BookTok recommendation. I'm just saying it's the winner of the Orwell Prize for Political Writing last year. It's on, I forget the name of the dude, Michael Kirst, I want to say, great BookToker who does a lot of history books. So this is a non-fiction, this is a history. and it's Say Nothing, incredibly highly publicized and incredibly well acclaimed. A true story of murder and memory in Northern Ireland by Patrick Keefe. Now, I'm excited for this one. It looks heavy. It's a bit of a chunky boy, although, like all good non-fiction books, a good third. That is just footnotes. So that's the actual book. And I'm looking forward to it. I know a little bit about the troubles in Northern Ireland, but I don't know enough. And this is the blurb. One night in December 1972, Jean McConville, a mother of 10, was abducted from her home in Belfast and never seen alive again. Her disappearance would haunt her orphan children, the perpetrators of the brutal crime, and a whole society in Northern Ireland for decades. I go back and forward on true crime and the politics of it and the ethics of it, but something like this, which is really, I think, a history book, but starting out as a true crime, like kind of anchoring it in this crime and kind of extrapolating out from that, I think is really intriguing and smart. So I'm excited to read that. Say Nothing will be the history read for this month. This is the next Stephen King book that's on the list. So I'm reading Stephen King chronological order. My last read was Pet Sematary, which I absolutely adored. And it goes from Pet Sematary, which, you know, everybody talks about, to this book, which nobody talks about ever. I haven't really heard. This is kind of... So King wrote this incredibly influential and really well-loved fantasy series, which I haven't read. I've only read the first one of Gunslinger. And this was him starting to muck around with the ideas of fantasy. The Gunslinger was written a few years before, and for all sorts of reasons I won't get into, is very weird as a novel and not a great introduction to King or to The Dark Tower, from what I gather. But this is like, I mean, the blurb makes it sound like super traditional fantasy. While evidence is gathered, the king is dead, murdered by an unusual poison. While evidence is gathered and the land of Delane mourns, Flag, the kingdom's musician, unscrupulous, greedy and powerful, plots. Sounds vaguely like The Blade itself, Joe Abercrombie's. Listen, I don't really know. I'm intrigued by the fact that the magician is called Flag, who is an incredibly important character. Like, he's the big bad guy in The Stand, which in terms of King's publishing timeline was published, 8 or 9 years ago. So I think this is interesting. I'm just interested to read. I'm a bit concerned because it never rates highly on anybody's list. Like, every King reader is very in kind of vehement disagreement about his top 5 or top 10 books, but everybody is kind of in agreement on what's a mid-tier Stephen King book or a low-tier Stephen King book, and I fear that this is not particularly high. But anyway, we're carrying on. So this is the next read for Stephen King. Then we have another BookTok, big YouTube science fiction fantasy story, which I have never read, Red Rising by Pierce Brown. So this is more sci-fi, and it's been described as Game of Thrones meets Hunger Games, which I'm very interested in. That sounds like fun. So I hope it's just fun. That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping for something that is really easy to read, is quick, action-packed, interesting kind of world building, but I think I'm learning that I much prefer plot to world building. And if you've got to spend 2 chapters talking to me about a magic system, I know some people are just into that, but I just want stabbing and car chases is all I want. So anyway, Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Every YouTuber or BookTok will tell you that this is brilliant, and they haven't steered me wrong with Mistborn, so I'm eager to give this a go. Another non-fiction book, a bit of a left turn. I actually love high-quality video games journalism. I think it's a really interesting, it's a really interesting form to write about in terms of pop culture and history, and it's a really pressurized industry. So Jason Schreier is a really great writer. He writes for Bloomberg about the video game industry. This is his first book called Press Reset, which I think is about ruin and recovery in the video game industry is the subtitle. I'm really keen to give this a good read just because I think he has really great insight into some really big teams. Like, he talks to a bunch of developers at Blizzard, a bunch of people at BioWare, and different big games. So I'm just interested to hear about, you know, particularly in the last 12 months, we've seen huge crashes and booms in the video game industry, and a lot of consolidation, a lot of staff being let go, which is really sad. So I'm just interested to read. This is his second book. His first book was Blood, Sweat and Pixels, which I haven't read. I listened to Jason Schreier on a podcast called Triple Play, which is one of those rare video game podcasts that is actually intelligent and actually has really great kind of insight and analysis behind it. So I'm excited to give this a read. He's also got a book coming out in October, which unless this is a bomb, which I don't think it will be, I will probably read, which is really a great big history book on Blizzard, the developer who did Diablo and Overwatch and StarCraft and Warcraft, and those are big games for me, and I really love and have loved Blizzard, and they've been hit on hard times recently, so I'm really interested to read his account of that. So that's press reset. My kind of comic or graphic novel pick for this month is I'm about halfway through already, because I started a couple of weeks ago, to be honest. I haven't picked it up recently, but I want to finish it certainly by the end of this month, is the Secret Six Omnibus by Gail Simone. So it's a proper omnibus. This is it without the dust jacket off. It's one of those rare ones that has a great cover with the dust jacket off. So this was recommended to me through comics, etc. Shout out to those guys, they're brilliant, located in Brisbane, Meanjin, Australia. Gail Simone is a fantastic comics book writer by all accounts, but I haven't read a lot of her stuff. And this was one of her most acclaimed runs from like 2008 to 2011. Where hearing her introduction of it is really great, because you kind of get the sense that she needed to write a villains team story, but couldn't use any of the major villains or even B-list or C-list villains from DC. So she had to pitch this story that ended up being this weird conglomeration of really sub-tier DC characters, and she kind of made it amazing. I am about halfway through. Some arcs are better than others. Some is better than others, but her characterization and how she's playing around and building this team is really fantastic. And I'm also keen for Bane to show up. Bane apparently shows up eventually. I can see that he's on the cover. So I'm really interested for that. I'm just at the point where Mad Hatter's showed up. I'm up to issue 3 of volume 2. So I'm excited to read more. But that's it for August, guys. There might be some more. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if we get through that. I'm not particularly married to it. I might change my mind. I'm a man of multitudes. Drop a comment below for what else you're excited for. Tell me what I should be reading in August or September or beyond. I'm very serious about taking recommendations. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you soon.